The dry sound of the wind cut through the training field like a razor. The desert sun burned the skin, and the heat seemed to vibrate on the sandy ground mixed with the smell of gunpowder and gun oil. I watched from a distance, leaning on the cane that supported what remained of my left knee, a vivid reminder of a mission in Afghanistan. On the firing line, 6 young Marines lined up, impeccable uniforms, eyes fixed on the target almost 1,000 meters away. They were the best of the new generation, or so they said. But the first shot was enough to break the silence with a familiar sound. The miss. The projectile hit the sand, meters below the target. A second shot, another miss. The drill sergeant began shouting, spitting out orders, while the boys exchanged uncertain glances. This was no ordinary training. It was a demonstration for a visiting general, and each miss echoed like an insult to the Marine Corps. I stood there, motionless, watching. The smell of the gunshot, the vibration of the weapon, the way the wind swayed the American flag in the background, it all brought me back to Kandahar, where I learned, the hard way, the value of a single shot. One of them looked in my direction and shook his head, laughing. "Hey, old man, want to come teach us?" he mocked. The laughter echoed, light but full of arrogance. I just smiled slightly and remained silent. The sergeant turned and, perhaps bothered by the atmosphere, replied, "Careful, recruit. That old man over there was a sniper in the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion." The laughter died instantly, but even so, no one took me seriously. I could feel it in their eyes, that kind of silent disdain, the same I've seen in rookie officers before an ambush. They thought they knew everything, until the field taught them otherwise. The general, impatient, crossed his arms. "We have 30 minutes before the official demonstration. If they don't get it right, I'll cancel the qualification," he said in a cold voice. The sergeant was sweating, the boy's pride was wavering, and despair hung in the air like thick smoke. It was then that the wind changed. I looked at the waving flag and saw the pattern of the bursts. An old instinct awoke. I took off my faded Marine cap, adjusted it on my head, and walked to the firing line. The sound of my cane hitting the dry ground sounded like a funeral drum. "Give me a weapon," I said calmly. The sergeant hesitated, looked at the general, and he simply nodded. They handed me an M40A5 sniper rifle, the same model I used in Helmand. I touched the barrel as if reuniting with an old war buddy. I lay down on the ground, took a deep breath, and tasted the metallic taste of the hot air. Time seemed to stand still. At that moment, everything I was, the soldier, the survivor, the broken man, resurfaced. I felt the wind on my face, listened to the rhythm of my heart, and adjusted the scope's reticle. My lips moved on their own. In a whisper I learned on the front lines. One shot, one life. I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the desert, and for a second the world was silent. The metallic impact came soon after, sharp, cutting, unmistakable. Target down, perfect center. The young men looked on, disbelieving. The general smiled, and I simply stood up, brushed the dust off my uniform and said, "The wind never lies. You just don't listen to it." The price of a steady gaze and a broken heart. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the sound of the first shot I fired in combat. Not the metallic sound of the gun, but the dry, almost muffled sound of the impact when someone's life is extinguished on the other side of the sights. It's an echo that never fades. I was only 21 years old when I was assigned to the 3rd Marine Reconnaissance Battalion. I grew up in a small town in rural Texas, where the hot wind carried the smell of gunpowder and rust. My father was a farmer and a Vietnam veteran, a tough man who believed that a firm handshake said more about a man than any medal. He was the one who taught me to aim before I even learned to write properly. I remember the day I hit a can 200 meters away with his old rifle. He smiled for the first time in months and said, "You were born to see further than others, son." Years later, I understood the weight of those words. In war, seeing further isn't a gift, it's a curse. When the 2001 bombing happened, I didn't think twice. I signed up for the enlistment that same day. I told my mother I'd be back before Christmas. She cried and hugged me so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. I'll never forget the smell of her hair in that hug, a mixture of soap and fear. The training was brutal. We slept 3 hours a night, ate dust, and learned to turn silence into a weapon. I was chosen for the sniper program because of my calmness and breath control. They said I had a steel gaze, the kind of gaze that doesn't tremble in the face of death. But the truth is, I was trembling inside. No one comes back the same after looking at someone's life through the reticle of a scope. In Kandahar, the sand was so hot it melted the soles of our boots. We spent hours motionless on hills, hidden under camouflage nets, waiting for enemy movement. Patience was the soul of the mission. I learned listening to the wind, counting seconds by the beating of my heart, and distinguishing the sound of nervous breathing from a light breeze. It was there that I lost my best friend, Ramirez, a boy with an easy smile who always talked about the daughter he hadn't yet met. He was only 2 meters away from me when the explosion took him. The dust covered everything, and when it settled, only silence remained. Since that day, I carry a fragment of that grenade in my left knee, and the weight of guilt in my chest. When I returned to the United States, no one recognized me anymore. Not even me. The streets seemed slow. People talked too much and said too little. On silent nights, the sound of gunfire echoed in my mind, and Ramirez's face emerged from the shadows. I was discharged with honors, medals, but none of them paid the price of the memories. I tried to work, I tried to adapt, but the truth is that the camp never left me. I saw patterns in the wind, calculated distances on each street, and without realizing it, I was still scanning windows for unseen snipers. It was Sergeant Miller who called me back years later to help train the new Marines. He said they needed someone with eyes for war. I accepted, but not out of pride. I accepted because, deep down, I wanted to find a reason to keep breathing. And that's how I ended up on that sandy field that day, facing young men who carried in their eyes the same arrogance I had before seeing hell. They only saw an old man limping, leaning on a cane. But I saw every mistake in posture, every wrong breath, every small deviation that the wind would turn into failure. I was there not just to teach. I was there to remind them, and myself, that war doesn't end when you leave the battlefield. It just changes location. At that shooting range, time seemed to run differently. The sound of unsuccessful shots mingled with the metallic clang of rifles being reloaded and the frustration that echoed in the air. The young shooters were irritated, Sergeant Miller was sweating, and the general watched from afar, impassive, with his hands crossed behind his back. I remained there, leaning against the wooden fence, observing every movement with the eyes of someone who had already read death in the subtext of a breath of wind. They didn't miss for lack of training. They missed because they didn't feel the shot. They shot with their eyes, not with instinct. And instinct is something that can't be taught in manuals. The sergeant looked at me from afar and gestured for me to approach. I walked slowly, each step measured, the sound of my cane hitting the dry ground. Some of the boys looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. One of them, the youngest, chuckled softly and said to his colleague beside him, "Here comes the grandpa of wars. He'll say the wind talks to him." I heard it, but I preferred silence. Silence is a more precise weapon than any rifle. Miller cleared his throat and formally introduced me. "This is veteran Jonathan Hale, sniper of the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. He served in Kandahar and Helmand. He's here at the command's request to conduct an evaluation." The name Helmand made some eyes perk up. That name weighed like lead among military personnel. But even so, I perceived the disdain hidden behind their restrained expressions. They respected history, not the man. "Mr. Hale, would you like to observe the next group?" Miller asked. I nodded. They lined up again, and the dry sound of gunfire returned. They missed again. One of the recruits threw his rifle to the ground and shouted, "That's impossible. The wind changes all the time." "The wind changes for everyone," I replied calmly. "But a good marksman changes with it." He gave me a hostile look, the kind of look I'd seen on men before they did something stupid. "Then why don't you show him what you're made of, old man?" he said, challenging me. Some laughed. Others tensed. Miller intervened quickly. "Watch your words, soldier." But I raised my hand, asking for calm. "It's all right, Sergeant. Let the boy speak. Sometimes you need to hear the wind scream before you understand the silence." That sentence hung in the air like suspended dust. The boy turned his face away, irritated, but something in my voice made him hesitate. There was a mixture of anger and shame in his eyes. I understood him, because I used to be him. The general walked towards us with firm steps and a closed expression. "We're wasting time," he said. "I have a demonstration in less than an hour, and none of these lads seem ready." "They are ready, sir. They just don't know how to listen yet," I replied without thinking. He stared at me coldly. "Listen?" Are you saying the problem is the wind, veteran? No, sir. I'm saying the problem is the silence within them. For a moment, the entire field was quiet. The general gave a half smile as if amused by the absurdity. Very well, Mr. Hale. If you think you can teach them, you have 15 minutes. If you can't, I'll end the training. The sergeant gave me a warning look, but I just took a deep breath. All right, I said. 15 minutes is more than enough time to teach someone to listen to what the wind has to say. The lads exchanged glances, some mocking, others curious. I picked up one of the rifles from the ground, examined the stock, checked the sights, and as I did so, I began to speak. The most common mistake a sniper makes is thinking that accuracy comes from the eyes. But the eye only sees what the mind allows. You look at the target, but you don't see the path of the shot. Silence grew. They watched me, still divided between disbelief and attention. I pressed the rifle against my chest and continued. In combat, the wind is not the enemy. It is the warning. The dust rises first on the right side, and the flag moves before the sound arrives. He who learns to listen to the wind survives. The general looked at his watch. 9 minutes, he said. I nodded, put the rifle back on the ground and added, then learn from your mistake. Observe the wind, not the target. Breathe with it. Feel the breath of the world before you shoot. But they laughed. One of them even imitated my voice. Feel the breath of the world, he mocked. You speak like a shaman, not a marine. Laughter echoed around. The general didn't stop it, nor did the sergeant. And there, standing, surrounded by gazes that mixed contempt and boredom, I realized that the real enemy wasn't their ignorance. It was their pride. The same pride that had already killed good soldiers before the first shot. I knew that day would still have a price, and that the wind once again was about to change. That afternoon was strangely hot for the time of year. The sun burned the skin and made the horizon tremble as if the very air were melting. The wind, my old ally, blew irregularly, and yet I could hear the laughter even before I understood the reason. The young snipers had formed a circle, and the most insolent of them, the same one who had challenged me minutes before, mockingly imitated my voice. Feel the wind, hear the world, breathe with the earth, he said, gesticulating in a caricatured way while the others laughed. Their laughter had a hollow sound, the kind of sound that reminded me of the unprepared mercenaries I encountered on the Pakistani border. Noise without substance. Sergeant Miller, lacking the courage to intervene before the general, simply stared at the ground, embarrassed. I remained motionless, observing them like someone analyzing the behavior of recruits who still haven't grasped the weight of the uniform they wear. Their pride was flammable, and that field was the match. One of the boys picked up the rifle I had used minutes before. Let's see if the old sage is right, he said, adjusting the sights. Listen to the wind, isn't that right? He laughed, struck a theatrical pose, and fired. The sound echoed dryly, followed by another miss. The bullet went wide of the target, raising a small cloud of sand. More laughter. I guess the wind didn't like me, he mocked. Or maybe the wind only talks to ghosts, another replied. That phrase hit me like a punch in the gut, because in a way, it was true. I was a ghost. A man who had left pieces of himself scattered across distant deserts, trying to convince himself that he was still breathing. The general, who until then had maintained his composure, gave a slight, impatient sigh. Hale, I think we've seen enough, he said coldly. Our snipers don't need philosophy, they need results. With all due respect, sir, I replied. The problem isn't technique, it's listening. He raised an eyebrow. Listening? Yes. They hear the sound of the shot, but they don't hear the silence that precedes it. It is in the silence that the shot is born. The general laughed, a brief, sharp laugh, colder than steel. You should be giving motivational speeches, not training snipers. The recruits' laughter returned, even louder. The sound of it echoed in the open field, mixed with the whistling of the wind that seemed to mock me as well. For a moment I felt something inside me go out, the same flame that kept me firm in combat, the focus that separates man from chaos. I looked at the horizon and saw the desert stretching to infinity. And in that emptiness, for a brief moment, I saw Ramirez's face. He looked at me with that same calm smile, the same look he had before each mission, as if to say, It's not about them. It's about you. The memory of him brought me back. I took a deep breath, maintained my posture, and simply said, "The wind always speaks, even when no one wants to listen." The general snorted, turned his back, and began to walk away. Training over. These boys will learn nothing today. Miller took a step forward, hesitant, trying to argue. "Sir, perhaps we should let the veteran try the shot. Just a demonstration." But the general raised his hand. "We've wasted too much time on war legends. This field is for men of the present, not for ghosts of the past." Those words landed heavy, more so than any insult. I felt the blood pounding in my temples. The laughter returned, timid, but enough to pierce me. I knew that moment would be etched in their memory. The old man limping, demoralized, staring at the ground while the new generation ridiculed him. And it was there, at the lowest point of my dignity, that something inside me awakened again. A different silence took over the field, as if even the wind had stopped to observe. I picked up my cane, leaned my tired body against it, and walked slowly toward the firing line. Each step made the sand crunch under my boots. The sound of my breathing was the only noise in the air. The sergeant tried to stop me. "Hale, let it go. It's not worth it." But I kept walking, without looking back. "Sometimes, Sergeant, it's worth reminding the wind of what it's capable of." The sun bent on the horizon, and the field plunged into a fiery orange. Behind me, the laughter ceased. They felt the atmosphere change, a kind of silence that precedes something inevitable. I bent down, touched the sand, and let it slip through my fingers. The wind picked up again, stronger, and I knew in that instant that the turning point was about to happen. That afternoon was strangely hot for the time of year. The sun burned the skin and made the horizon tremble as if the very air were melting. The wind, my old ally, blew irregularly, and yet I could hear the laughter even before I understood the reason. The young snipers had formed a circle, and the most insolent of them, the same one who had challenged me minutes before, mockingly imitated my voice. "Feel the wind, hear the world, breathe with the earth," he said, gesticulating in a caricatured way while the others laughed. Their laughter had a hollow sound, the kind of sound that reminded me of the unprepared mercenaries I encountered on the Pakistani border. Noise without substance. Sergeant Miller, lacking the courage to intervene before the general, simply stared at the ground, embarrassed. I remained motionless, observing them like someone analyzing the behavior of recruits who still haven't grasped the weight of the uniform they wear. Their pride was flammable, and that field was the match. One of the boys picked up the rifle I had used minutes before. "Let's see if the old sage is right," he said, adjusting the sights. "Listen to the wind. Isn't that right?" He laughed, struck a theatrical pose, and fired. The sound echoed dryly, followed by another miss. The bullet went wide of the target, raising a small cloud of sand. More laughter. "I guess the wind didn't like me," he mocked. "Or maybe the wind only talks to ghosts," another replied. That phrase hit me like a punch in the gut, because in a way, it was true. I was a ghost, a man who had left pieces of himself scattered across distant deserts, trying to convince himself that he was still breathing. The general, who until then had maintained his composure, gave a slight, impatient sigh. "Hale, I think we've seen enough," he said coldly. "Our snipers don't need philosophy, they need results." "With all due respect, sir," I replied. "The problem isn't technique, it's listening." He raised an eyebrow. "Listening?" "Yes. They hear the sound of the shot, but they don't hear the silence that precedes it. It is in the silence that the shot is born." The general laughed, a brief, sharp laugh, colder than steel. "You should be giving motivational speeches, not training snipers." The recruit's laughter returned, even louder. The sound of it echoed in the open field, mixed with the whistling of the wind that seemed to mock me as well. For a moment I felt something inside me go out, the same flame that kept me firm in combat, the focus that separates man from chaos. I looked at the horizon and saw the desert stretching to infinity. And in that emptiness, for a brief moment, I saw Ramirez's face. He looked at me with that same calm smile, the same look he had before each mission, as if to say, "It's not about them, it's about you." The memory of him brought me back. I took a deep breath, maintained my posture, and simply said, "The wind always speaks, even when no one wants to listen." The general snorted, turned his back, and began to walk away. Training over. These boys will learn nothing today. Miller took a step forward, hesitant, trying to argue. Sir, perhaps we should let the veteran try the shot. Just a demonstration. But the general raised his hand. We've wasted too much time on war legends. This field is for men of the present, not for ghosts of the past. Those words landed heavy, more so than any insult. I felt the blood pounding in my temples. The laughter returned, timid, but enough to pierce me. I knew that moment would be etched in their memory. The old man limping, demoralized, staring at the ground while the new generation ridiculed him. And it was there, at the lowest point of my dignity, that something inside me awakened again. A different silence took over the field, as if even the wind had stopped to observe. I picked up my cane, leaned my tired body against it, and walked slowly toward the firing line. Each step made the sand crunch under my boots. The sound of my breathing was the only noise in the air. The sergeant tried to stop me. "Hale, let it go. It's not worth it." But I kept walking without looking back. Sometimes, Sergeant, it's worth reminding the wind of what it's capable of. The sun bent on the horizon and the field plunged into a fiery orange. Behind me, the laughter ceased. They felt the atmosphere change, a kind of silence that precedes something inevitable. I bent down, touched the sand, and let it slip through my fingers. The wind picked up again, stronger, and I knew in that instant that the turning point was about to happen. The sound of gunfire still echoed as the commander approached, his gaze fixed on the ground and his hands trembling. The silence around was almost reverent, as if the field had become a temple, and each man there was a faithful before something sacred. The sun slowly hid behind the mountains, casting a golden light that made the suspended dust shimmer like fragments of old memories. He took a deep breath, as if carrying the weight of a mistake on his shoulders. "Sir, I didn't know who you were." "You didn't need to know," I replied, maintaining a firm tone but without arrogance. "Respect shouldn't depend on a name." He nodded, embarrassed. One of the recruits, the same one who laughed first, stepped forward. He had tears in his eyes. When I laughed, I thought you were just another old man with bar stories. Those words cut me deeper than any bullet. Not out of insult, but out of remembrance of the time when I too doubted those who came before me. I also laughed at a veteran, I confessed. Before I understood that each wrinkle on their skin is a map of the battles they won so that we could laugh. The boy lowered his head. Behind him, the commander signaled for everyone to gather. The Marines formed a line. No one spoke. The wind passed slowly, as if even it knew that something solemn was about to happen. The commander raised his voice, now firm and full of emotion. "Marines, before you stand Sergeant Nathan Cole, veteran of the 3rd Reconnaissance Division, decorated with the Bronze Star, survivor of Fallujah and elite instructor of the former Shadow Sniper program." The faces transformed. The eyes that once judged me now sought me with admiration. One by one, the recruits saluted. The sound echoed across the field, dry, rhythmic, almost like drum beats. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I had sworn never to wear that pride again. But it wore me alone now, like an old uniform that never left me. The commander approached and extended a silver badge, worn at the edges. "This is the emblem of the elite course. I want you to receive it back." I looked at the metal and for a moment saw the reflection of a face I barely recognized. "It's not mine anymore," he said. "It belongs to you now, the new generation. Keep it, but understand its weight." He hesitated, then nodded, his eyes welling up with tears. It was then that one of the recruits knelt. "Sir, allow me to say, I've never seen anyone shoot like that." I smiled slightly. "Because you shoot to hit. I shoot to remember." Those words hung in the air. Some understood immediately. Others would only understand years later, when the echo of war visited them on silent nights. The commander turned to the group and said, "From today onwards, the Delta firing range will be renamed. It will be called Post Cole, in honor of a man who taught us what true marksmanship and true respect is." A murmur crossed the line. My eyes filled with tears and I looked away, embarrassed by the emotion. "I don't need this," I tried to say. "I just wanted you to remember what it means to wear this uniform." "That's exactly why you deserve it," he replied. For a moment I thought about refusing, but when I looked around, I saw something on the faces of those young men that I hadn't seen anywhere in a long time. Humility. They finally understood that being a soldier wasn't about strength, but about legacy. The sun had already set, and the field was tinged with dark blue. The American flag fluttered slowly, its fabric reflecting the last rays of the day. I approached and adjusted the flagpole, straightening the symbol I had so often seen draped over the coffins of friends. I touched the flag with my calloused fingers and murmured, "For all those who did not return." Behind me, the sound of boots lining up echoed in sync. The commander gave the final command, "Honor to the veteran." And everyone repeated in chorus, "Honor to the veteran." The echo of that phrase pierced the field like a silent thunderclap. I closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. When I opened them again, the commander was standing beside me. "You showed us more than technique. You showed us what soul is." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "And you reminded me that there is still purpose after war." As I walked off the field, the sound of gunfire returned. But this time, it was different. There was no more arrogance, no more haste. Each shot seemed to carry respect. Each sound, a promise. And I knew that as long as there are young people willing to listen to the wind, nothing we have lived through will be forgotten. Night fell slowly over the training field. The wind blew cold, carrying the metallic smell of gunpowder and the distant murmur of the sea. I stood there, alone, with my rifle resting on the ground and my hands trembling. Not from weakness, but from memory. The silence was dense, almost palpable, and each gust of wind seemed to whisper names that only I understood. I closed my eyes, and the faces returned. Harris, with his crooked smile and bad trench jokes, Miller, who always wrote letters that never arrived, and Thompson, the best sniper I ever knew, until the day the desert swallowed him without warning. I still remembered the dust covering his face, the blood trickling between my fingers, the dry sound of his failing breath. "Hold on, brother." That was the last thing I said to him. But he didn't hold on. Since then, every shot I fired has carried the echo of that moment. Each time I looked through a scope, I didn't just see the target. I saw the emptiness they left behind. Maybe that's why the wind heard me. Because it knew I was shooting with memories, not anger. I opened my eyes and stared at the horizon. The field was deserted now, but the bullet marks still gleamed in the moonlight. Small holes aligned, perfect, almost like a constellation drawn on the wood. And I thought, maybe that's what war does. It transforms pain into precision. I sat on the ground, leaning the rifle against my side. I ran my hand over the stock like someone caressing an old friend. The cold, worn wood seemed to pulse with memories. "You and I, huh?" I murmured. "How many ghosts did we bury together?" For a moment I smelled the rain mixed with gunpowder. I remembered a day in Kandahar, when the sky collapsed on us and the sound of the storm drowned out the machine guns. It was the only moment when the world seemed to breathe again. I had promised myself that if I survived, I would never shoot again. But there I was, again with the rifle in my hands, again trying to teach young people to listen to the wind, when I myself was still struggling to silence the voices inside my head. I took a deep breath. The cold air burned my lungs, bringing a strange feeling of peace. It was then that I realized I didn't return to the field to teach anyone how to hit the target. I returned to reconcile with the man I was. I looked at the sky. The full moon seemed to gaze back at me as if it were a watchful eye. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt gratitude. Because despite everything, I was still alive. And with that came a responsibility. The responsibility to tell their story. I picked up my notebook, the same one I carried on missions. The pages were yellowed with marks of sand and sweat. I wrote slowly, like someone recording a confession. The perfect aim isn't at the tip of the rifle, but in the heart of the one who pulls the trigger. The true marksman does not look for the target. He listens to the wind and understands the silence. I closed the notebook. For a second, I heard the crack of the metal cooling beside me. And I realized that the sound of the recruits' shots, which still echoed in the distance, no longer bothered me. On the contrary, it was music. A reminder that each new generation would learn, one way or another, that shooting without purpose is the same as living without a soul. I stood up slowly, feeling my bones protest like old war companions. I looked once more at the empty field, now illuminated only by distant headlights. Thompson, I murmured. I think today I finally hit what mattered. The breeze picked up, raising a fine dust that danced before me. For a moment I swear I saw their silhouettes, Harris, Miller, Thompson, marching side by side toward the horizon, and then they vanished. I smiled, for the first time in a long time, without pain. Because I understood that war never ends, but we learn to make peace with it, within ourselves. And in that instant, with the rifle resting on the ground and the moon watching me from above, I realized that true victory wasn't in how many targets I hit, but in how many memories I finally managed to let go of. I was already on my way to the gate when I heard the first sound, a dry crack, unlike the regular training shots. I stopped. The sound echoed again, louder, more urgent. It was the kind of shot that didn't come from practice. It came from panic. I turned immediately. On the field, the lights flashed in alert. I saw soldiers running, muffled screams, orders blurry in the wind. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I ran as fast as I could. The pain in my legs reminded me of every scar, but the adrenaline silenced everything. When I reached the firing line, I saw 2 recruits on the ground, one of them wounded, the other trying to drag him. The commander was shouting orders, but the chaos was total. One of the rookie shooters had lost control. He was shouting something about the wind, about voices, his eyes completely filled with fear. He was armed, pointing his rifle at anything that moved. "Lower your weapons," the commander yelled, but he didn't listen. His breathing was rapid, uneven, the sound of someone who is no longer here. I knew that look, the same look I'd seen in many men before they lost their souls on the battlefield. Without thinking, I stepped forward. "Son, put down your weapon." My voice came out deep, firm, like in the old days. He looked at me trembling. I can't. They're talking to me. The wind is talking." My heart pounded in my chest. I knew exactly how he felt. The line between the sound of the wind and the voices of war is thin, and if you don't learn to distinguish them, they will take you. I took a step closer. "Listen here, boy. The wind doesn't speak with fear. It speaks with purpose." I pointed to the ground. "Drop the rifle." But the noise around us, screams, boots running, the alarm, made the boy tremble even more. He turned the barrel toward the group of recruits behind me. A second of indecision could cost lives. That's when instinct took over. I pointed my rifle, not to shoot, but to guide. I aimed above his head and fired. The sound echoed like thunder. The impact of the sound made him fall to his knees, stunned. I ran to him before he could react, grabbed the rifle barrel and pulled it from his hands. He was crying, trembling, repeating incoherent words. "I just wanted to hit the wind." I lowered myself, looked directly into his eyes and said, "You didn't miss the wind, son. It just took you too far. Now breathe. I'm here." The commander and 2 instructors approached. One of them knelt to help the boy, who was now sobbing weakly. The other looked at me as if trying to understand what had just happened. "How did you know what to do?" asked the commander, still breathless. "Because I've been in his place," I replied. "And someone one day stopped me from pulling the trigger too." He was silent for a while. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. "You just saved his life. And maybe everyone else's here." I shook my head. "I didn't save anyone. I just remembered that the war continues inside us, even when the field is at peace." As the recruits surrounded the wounded man and help arrived, I looked at the dark sky. The clouds moved quickly, and the sound of the wind changed direction. I closed my eyes and listened. For a moment, the sound was the same as before. The whistling through the valleys, the noise that preceded each shot, the whisper that separated the living from the dead. But there was something different now. It wasn't the sound of war. It was the sound of redemption. The boy, still supported, turned his face to me and murmured, "Sir, how can you hear the wind without going crazy?" The question hung in the air. I looked at him and replied, "I don't listen to the wind to understand the world. I listen to it to remember that I'm still in it." The commander approached again, speaking in a low tone. "This boy is going to need help. We all do," he said. "The difference is that some learn to hide it better." As the sound of the sirens faded and the field returned to silence, I realized that this was the real test. Not the gunshots, nor the reconnaissance, but that moment, looking into the abyss and choosing not to let it swallow you. The wind blew once more, touching my face like an old memory. And for the first time in many years, I heard it without fear. "You can speak," I whispered. "Now I understand." The leaves moved, the dust danced, and a shiver ran through my body. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe not. But I swear I heard a soft, almost imperceptible voice answer. "Mission accomplished, Sergeant." I closed my eyes and a warm tear escaped. That wasn't just the sound of the wind. It was the echo of those who stayed behind, telling me that, at last, I could rest.
The echo of the last shot still lingered in the air as silence took over the firing range. The metallic sound of the shrapnel ricocheting off the hills slowly died away, swallowed by a cold wind that seemed to come straight from the past. My ears were still ringing, but what echoed most was not the sound. It was their gaze. The young Marines couldn't say a word. They just stood there, motionless, breathing heavily, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. One of them still held his rifle, his knuckles white with tension. Another, the one who had mocked me at the beginning, lowered his gaze, unable to bear the weight of the moment. That shot wasn't just a hit. It was a lesson etched in time. They had spent weeks trying to hit that distant target, a steel plate almost invisible to the naked eye, placed beyond the hill, where the wind changed direction every second. But a single shot was enough. A single dry crack to remind everyone that experience doesn't age, it only improves. The instructor, a major with a hard look, walked toward me. Dust rose with each of his steps. He stopped a few inches away and stared at the perfect hole in the center of the target through the binoculars. He took a deep breath. "Wow, sir, he murmured. "Even our best can't do this in this wind." I gave a half smile. "The wind changes, Major, but patience, that's constant." He nodded silently. Behind him, the recruits began to approach, slowly, as if approaching a living legend. One of them handed me the cartridge of the bullet I used. It was still warm. The boy looked at me with genuine admiration. "Sir, how did you that?" I replied slowly. "I just listened to the field. The wind speaks, the metal responds. You just need to stop screaming inside to hear." Some smiled, others lowered their heads. But everyone understood. The arrogance of youth had dissolved. The field no longer smelled of gunpowder and sweat, it smelled of respect. When I said goodbye, the sun was already beginning to set, tinging the horizon with that orange hue that only deserts and forgotten bases seem to have. I walked slowly to the gate, with the sound of boots rhythmically hitting the gravel ground. Each step reminded me of other times, of other firing ranges, of voices that were no longer heard. One of them ran up to me, breathless. It was the youngest boy. "Sir," he shouted, "thank you for showing us that the uniform doesn't make the soldier." I turned around. The wind stirred my worn jacket. "No, son," I replied. "What makes the soldier is what he carries here." I touched my chest. The rest is just fabric and memory. I kept walking. Behind me, the sound of the young men's voices mingled with the beating of the flags. For a moment, I felt like I was back in the past, lying on top of a hill, rifle at my side, heart calm before the shot. But this time, there were no enemies, only time. And time is the only target none of us can hit. When I reached the gate, the major called me one last time. "Sergeant?" I turned to the side. "You should come back more often. They need men like you." I smiled without looking back. "Maybe, but I'll only come back when the wind calls." And I moved on. The sun disappeared behind the mountains and the base grew smaller as I walked away. In my pocket, the cartridge the boy had given me. Cold now, but heavy with meaning. I looked one last time at the horizon. The field seemed empty, but I knew that shot still echoed. Not only in the metal of the target, but in the memory of those boys and in mine. Because sometimes a single shot is enough to remind the world who you are.